Hello everyone, and welcome to our CC webinar sponsored by HAUD. Today's webinar is co-hosted by Career Community. We are delighted to have you here today. We are proud to welcome HAUD team, Joanna and Ron, whose insightful presentation will be shared with you shortly. You also will be able to ask the question throughout the presentation. Please make sure to use the chat box, and the speakers will address them at the end of the webinar. We hope you enjoy the webinar and find it valuable. Thank you for joining us. Please enjoy and stay tuned. Now, over to you, HAUD team, Joanna and Ron. The stage is yours.
Good afternoon from UK, and good evening or good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar together with Career Community about future-proofing A2P SMS from challenges to opportunities. My name is Joanna Kuligowska. I'm the head of Global Market Intelligence at HAUD, really a part of thought leadership team at HAUD that closely collaborates with the larger ecosystem of business messaging to identify all the challenges and opportunities that we're facing today. And today I'm very pleased to be joined by a great colleague of mine, Ron Bonnici. Ron, over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Bastos. Thanks, Joanna. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Depends where you are located. Pleased to have you here. So yes, we will be discussing today what is the future of A2P messaging, A2P SMS mainly. I'm Ron Bonnici. I'm with HAUD for quite a while now, and I'm the Vice President for Pre-Sales and Product Management. I would like to have an open discussion. So any questions we'll be taking any questions at the end. So Joanna, I will share the screen.
Yes, and while Ron is sharing his screen, a few words about HAUD. We are a technology vendor working with our customers globally, global operators and other messaging companies to really get the most out of the messaging business, and that very often revolves around the aspect of securitization and monetization of business messaging streams, while keeping our customers in control of their entire messaging business and life cycle. So today, we're going to talk between myself and Ron about something that is very important, which is securing trust and redefining value in A2P SMS. So I'm going to start, Ron, today with maybe a quick recap statement of where is the market, A2P market today, yes? So definitely A2P has been ever-growing channel for the last decade, or even longer than that, has been achieving great success and many success stories that we might touch upon later on. But we are approaching almost the end of 2023, and would like to take a little moment to recap. It's been a challenging year for A2P messaging for many reasons. I mean, quite of them widely spoken in the market. There's been a lot of industry talk about different behaviors, challenges that we're seeing today. But I would like to ask you, as you handle those two very important areas of responsibility within HAUD, so you're very close to that, so from your to close commercial and also the product, obviously, from your point of view, what are the main challenges the channel is facing today?
Question. Absolutely. Let me start from saying that SMS has been widely used, right, for the last decade or so. And I think there's still a space for SMS. The problem with SMS, I believe, is that it's a trusted channel, right? So a lot of people are used to it. Yeah, so a lot of brands found it as a channel to reach to their subscribers. But what happened lately, especially since the COVID and digital transformation, a lot of these fraudulent activities has increased quite drastically, right? So from what we've seen in the market, from a product as strategy perspective as well, we're seeing this into two main areas. So basically the frauds, right? So the smishing, the spoofing, and also something that we would also like to highlight is the artificial traffic inflation and the trashing, right? But also the pricing, right? So there's operators who have increased their prices quite substantially. So the brands have seen their operational costs growing exponentially as well. So they are kind of scared, right? So it's not exactly the right at the moment environment to do
So we have those two main challenges, if I hear what you're saying. Yes, so you are talking about two main challenges that the channel will be facing. We have, and I will agree with you, we have the pricing, the growing pricing, and the impact that the pricing increases have on the brands, increasing their spends quite significantly year on year. Yeah, that obviously is one of the impacts, and then the fraud. So that I can confirm from market intelligence perspective, we have seen quite a lot of it's more like a cascade effect. We're seeing some significant traffic streams in the market disappearing, some traffic streams eroding, volumes in general, especially on the international side, decreasing in some markets, or shifting to other channels, yes, but basically being gone. And operators are in a way no longer have a monopoly today on the communication channel, as there are many ways to deliver a message. So yeah, I would like to hear from you about from HAUD's perspective, what can be done to help mobile operators, but basically how to help the channel, the SMS channel, stay relevant.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. It is important to start from here. I mean, we believe there's still space for SMS, right? So might be changing, the use cases might be changing, but there will be still the place for SMS for obvious reasons. I don't think we need to go into more detail, but SMS is come by default. It's a native channel, so on. It's very simple, right? So on and so forth. So the SMS will remain for the time ahead. So what are we doing from our end to make sure now to have this trust, building trust towards SMS, right? So what is the strategy that we are putting in place vis-a-vis what we have discussed, the fraud and the pricing, right? The pricing strategy. So we have defined these four main areas, right, of focus, which obviously each one of these will, we will be deep diving a bit on each one, but are the main areas that lead towards first. You need to protect it. You have to keep the trust there. And the SMS, how you can do that is obviously by enforcing this channel, right? Putting enforcement onto this channel. We make sure that these fraudulent activities are tackled, right? How can you do this? Obviously, you can do it by having the right technology in place, right? So putting the right technology into the network to make sure that you are protected. However, there are the technologies that are being used in conjunction, as you said, because some frauds are basically consequence of the strategy, the pricing strategy. We're not saying that it's bad, but obviously there's a ceiling, as you mentioned, and we also think, as we're going to discuss in point number 3, that not every SMS should be treated the same. So there are different values.
So many use cases an SMS might have, right? There's so many
correct.
potential use cases. However, yeah, the pricing model is the same, isn't it?
Absolutely. So there's no flexibility at the moment, right? So we have a flat rate. The only difference is between domestic and international, but in most cases, this is like a flat rate across all the SMS types. We also will be showing the difference between the domestic and international. I think that you will be going through soon. And finally, obviously, as you said, obviously, once you have this flexibility, you can start generating new use cases. So I believe there are multiple use cases that are still missing that can be looked into, right? But there needs to be an appetite by the whole, by all the players within the market industry to have this kind of approach.
You mentioned implementing and differentiated value-based pricing to compete with alternative channels. Can you mention some of the alternative channels today SMS is competing against from your perspective?
Yes, I think there's no hidden secret that one of the major competitors at the moment are WhatsApp. However,
I think there is another contendant potentially. Yes, it's also interesting in the light of what broke the news in A2P industry last week about Apple potentially adopting P2P RCS. What's your take on that?
Correct. There's gonna be an interesting story to follow, because iPhone committed only towards the P2P side of RCS. They said they're going to be adhering only to the GSMA standard. I am actually looking forward to see how this is going to be, how this is going to evolve. So it's like a chess game.
Same here, really. And I think it's important to mention what you mentioned already, is that those other channels offer much wider flexibility, but much larger flexibility when it comes to pricing model, which SMS currently does not have. So we'll talk about it a little bit later, but let's go back to trust. Yes, let's talk about trust and why is the trust really so important? We have to understand that there's no adoption without trust of any channel. Trust in the integrity of the channel leads to adoption of the channel, and as a consequence to higher opening rates. So if users fundamentally trust the channel and trust that the channel is secure, they trust that the communication that arrives in their inbox originates from the brand they have purchased something, or they have an existing relationship with, or they might want to have an existing relationship in the future, and that leads to engagement with that brand. If on the flip side, if an end user does not trust the message that arrives in their inbox, I mean, I have it with my email, and if it comes to my Gmail, I assume it's fraud. There's no way that well, okay, what's happening here? It's back. Sorry about that. So on the flip side, yes, if there's no trust in the channel, then the automatically a subscriber, a user has this suspicion that the communication it might be fraudulent of nature, yes, and will not engage with the brand. So the trust element is essential. It's actually critical for protecting the reputation of the business, and also to increase the adoption, or to maintain the adoption of the channel.
We say that trust is hard to win, but easy to lose, right? So, as you said, I mean, you need to keep in mind both ends of the chain, right? So, what we need to make sure is that both ends, who are our customers? Customers are the users, and customers are the brand. So, we need to make sure that the both feel that they can use this channel in a trusted way. Correct. So. If we look into what frauds there are in the market, right, as I said, so we will be deep diving between the consumer and the businesses, the enterprises. This is a very good diagram that I like to use and present because it explains, right, this framework that we use to explain the different type of threats within the market. So if you look at the consumer side, right? So what is the biggest threat? As I mentioned, is at the moment spoofing. But smishing. But smishing, how does this? How is it protected? And how are the fraudsters using this? There are different ways, right? So what they're doing at the moment is, for example, first of all, you spoof a sender ID, right? Which is very important, as we're going to discuss now, that the organizations, the operators understand the benefit of registering sender IDs, right? And make them more restricted, okay? Why? Because obviously if I spoof a sender ID, and for me, it's easier to simulate, impersonate a business, right?
Yeah, I mean, we just spoke about this. Yes, it's very important to understand that breaks the trust. Yes, because if smishing happens and the subscribers can't trust anymore that the message originates from a trusted brand, a brand they can trust, then they will not engage, but they might engage as well, yeah, and that causes harm to the subscriber.
And sender ID is the most basic first thing you look at most of the times, right? So I skim through it and I say, okay, you don't really give a lot of attention, but it's a very basic first indication of who is sending you the message. And then within that message, there could be these URL smishing, right? Links that takes you to steal your identity. I mean, we all know what kind of threats these are. But on top of that, there are certain links that make users install malware on their phones, which, always complicating things, or, you're more at risk in this case, right? So again, I always say this, it's not protecting the individuals who are tech savvy, right? I mean, users are many, okay? In different markets, we operate throughout the world, right? So you have to protect all the subscribers, and if you look at the URLs, what the URLs at the moment, what they are doing with the URLs, how they play around with URLs, you can easily be fooled, right? Because
absolutely. I mean, we've seen some examples being shown and very often shared on social media or on LinkedIn of, first of all, fake messages or fraudulent messages that look better and more professional than business communication. And then also, I think the URL, which you mentioned, it's not straightforward because of how the URLs are being created for even an untrained for even a trained eye in SMS fraud to investigate whether this is legitimate. So there are so many ways of trying to play with the consumer's trust. But it's basically that smishing is so good because it wants you to trust it, isn't it?
All right. So those are the main areas that, I mean, impact the consumers. But then we move towards the businesses, right? So we've heard a lot in these last 2 years or so, especially very well, because you was one of who came to us and said, listen, see what Elon Musk is saying, right? The artificial and traffic inflation. Yeah. So when he started all this campaign against this artificial inflation of traffic.
Why is it impact? Maybe you can explain why is it impacting the business and how is it impacting the business and the industry behaviors such as trashing or artificial traffic inflation?
In simple terms, it's basically they're paying for traffic that is not there, right? So they're paying for traffic that ends up on a bot. Okay, so it's not traffic that they can convert. So for them has no value. This traffic has no value, even though they're paying for it, has no real value.
Okay, so it has no value because there's no conversion. The user is not real. Therefore, an enterprise cannot expect this to carry a certain ARP with it or conversion rate. But on the flip side, they pay for it, as you said, which means that it further increases their spend and maybe becomes also a factor or additional factor in choosing potentially a different channel for delivering their message. We've seen a lot of, and I have to share from my global market intelligence point of view, that we've seen a lot of brands experimenting with various channels outside of the SMS channels. There were some big brands this year that have decided to broadly reduce their usage of SMS, sometimes replacing it by email or well, American Express is one of them. Here in UK, my own bank, Lloyds Bank, has sent me a notification the other day that they are reducing SMS, and they're not changing into in-app notification. They're going to send me more emails, which I am not a fan of, because I am not reading my emails. There's no way I'm going to find it in this big sea of spam I receive on my personal Gmail every day. However, that is the knockdown effect of the security, the security concerns and the erosion of trust the SMS channel has faced in the last, let's say, 24 months. Yeah,
that tells us that the value is outpriced, right? So if the brand goes to a channel which is not as much as adopted as SMS, right, but they would prefer to use that, it means that the value that they're paying for is outpriced. That's all.
That's a very interesting topic, but let's go back to the fraud first. What can be done to stop that? How do we preserve the trust before we move to very interesting topic of what's the value, and very interesting discussion, what is the value for messaging?
Agreed.
So how do we preserve the trust?
So how do we preserve the trust? As we said, we need to look at the consumers and the businesses, right? So what are we suggesting? Let's talk about the smishing, right? So smishing, spoofing, spamming. We have defined a 4-pillar approach, right? Why? Because you will need to keep it simple. And also when you are speaking internally to the product, also to the customers, you need to explain each and every pillar, right? So, and how we get to the final solution where we can actually protect, right, and safeguard both ends, okay? So first thing, as we said, ideally, right, in every market, you register the brands, okay? This will diminish the spoofing, right? Because you know from whom you are expecting this kind of traffic, the sender ID, the URL, domain in this case, okay? And if possible, right, in many cases, and this also gives rise to additional use cases as we'll be discussing in the next slides, the sample text. Okay, so if you are sending a notification, you write your keywords. Okay, so what will be the keywords that will be as part of the message? Okay, it is important as well to speak out immediately that our aim is always to protect as well the privacy, okay, of the subscriber. So we have to work with this in the legal framework. Okay.
That's very interesting. I would like to spend a minute, conscious of time, a minute or two, and hear your opinion about brand registration. I'll explain to you why. We engaging with mobile operators and messaging companies, there's very often this argument saying, oh, too much paperwork, registering the brands reduces the ubiquity of SMS, it should be simple to use. It's not so straightforward, right? I understand there has to be a fine balance between the red tape, but ultimately, I strongly believe that brand registration and control of the sender IDs is very much needed to secure the channel for all the reasons you mentioned. So how do we break that? How do we break that objection? Yes, coming from some markets saying, "Oh, we don't want to introduce too much complication because the brands will not send SMS or not use SMS." What's your take on that?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about showing the value. Once you outweigh the value vis-a-vis the hassle, Yeah, obviously you need to keep this as simple as possible. So the process that we have is
has to be
quite simple.
simple. Yes, has to be
Needs to be simple,
seamless.
seamless, correct. So not rigorous, because obviously if you start playing around with multiple forms, multiple screens, obviously you'll put the enterprises away from using this approach. However, as we said, if you go to a bank and say, listen, this activity, this task, which will take X amount of minutes, right, will protect you from revenue loss or degrading your service or customer complaints, I'm sure that they will allow the time to do so, right? This also is valid as well for other businesses. So again, I think one of the most valuable things that is not here, but it is very important, is always, and that's why we're here, is to educate, right? Not only the players, right, the people in this ecosystem, but also those who are very close to the ecosystem, which are the brands in this case. Yeah.
Brands are willing to pay for that added value, or willing to go, whether in the form of investing time and effort and not necessarily commercials. Because if we look at the alternative channels, or if we look at the sort of a broader spectrum, it's a common model in social media, for instance, to pay for being a verified account or being a verified brand, in order to prove your identity and prove that element of trust. So I think our industry should not be shy of it and not hide behind the operational complexity, because that, I believe, using great technology can be done simple.
Correct. So the next phase would be, your second pillar is basically know your customer, right? I think we've heard this a lot of times. So at the moment, which I am really pleased to hear, is that since the Mobile World Congress last years, there was this initiative for operators to open their network. I think that's very valid, very important, right? For many reasons, as we're going to discuss in the next slides. So, and also there will be registration of numbers, make sure that the numbers are registered properly, and customer identity within this operator. Why all this? Because there are some checks and balances that we can apply, right, as well for other threats such as AIT. If I know your customer, I can say, okay, this number potentially is not a bot, right? So these kind of verification techniques. Then you have your knowledge base, which links to the previous one, and I hinted towards it. So number validation, okay? So is this number active? Okay, how long has been active? And stuff like this. Okay, again, as I said, we always operate within the legal framework, so there is no data of the customer which is passing through and back and forth between the systems. Something that we need to highlight as well, in some cases, certain businesses, you asked me about the value, right? So certain businesses, certain brands, certain enterprises have some legal commitments, right? So there would be local regulations within the country that they need to adhere to. And having this information, for example, age verification, okay, which is also something that is gaining momentum at the moment, okay, is also very important. And finally, obviously, as I have the next slide, and I always like to say this in all my panels, is the collaboration between the various players within the industry. So nobody can do it alone. I mean, this is not a fight that HAUD can tackle or anyone or the operator can tackle, but it's a fight that together we can, as much as possible, eliminate these threats. So the industry databases that are out there, we always seek collaboration and knowledge within the industry. And finally, obviously, there's the detection and blocking part. Obviously, there needs to be a platform technology in place that, because even if you collaborate, even if you put all this in place, this is information required, the data required, but at the end of the day, you need to enforce it, right? So collecting the data is very important for us, because that will give us some business logic, right, to apply some filtering techniques, scanning and filtering techniques. part of the detection tools, I wrote them down here, is basically analytical patterns. Again, this cascades from the previous two, knowledge base and KYC, okay, the input from the number verification, and have some additional checks and balances that we can put in place to validate certain numbers, okay? And also something that we are actively working on is basically this smishing URL, as I mentioned earlier. At the moment, I mean, we've seen a lot how these fraudsters became smarter and smarter, using also AI technologies themselves, right?
It's available to them too, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's available for exactly. So to identify these kind of patterns, okay? So I think that should be a separate webinar on its own, how you build a URL and how to detect it. If we look at collaboration, as I mentioned, it is important, right? So the information is not in one place, the data is not in one place. So it is important, again, stressing the fact that data privacy needs to be in place, but there is certain data information that can be shared to make this space more secure, right? So I have shared here, for example, information sharing, threat intelligences that are out there, the technology integrations between different platforms, between different players within the market. Okay, the standardization is very important. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, the education and awareness within the business, but not alone. I've listed here as well some examples, right? So if you have the sender registration in place, if I have the URL pre-registration in place, if I don't, if there's someone else who has it in the market, why not share it, right? Because obviously that makes our systems more efficient, okay? And everyone within the chain will benefit.
Yes, the collaboration is key. I think we've been hearing it a lot in all kinds of events this year, and hopefully there are more and more initiatives to share knowledge. And I think there has been, given where the market is today, there has been definitely more initiatives, and there's more, I would say, I don't want to call it appetite, but there's more willingness. And actually there's a need. I think everyone feels the need to share the knowledge in order to, deal with the trust and how to really increase or preserve the trust of the channel. So, yeah, we're going to move a bit up and talk about the maybe more commercial aspect of it. We touched a lot on security so far, but how do we really grow the market is a real challenge, right? I started with some maybe negativity this session, but it is a fact that the high growth rates of SMS are not that high anymore. Yes, and I would like to explore with you now why is that happening and what can be done, because from our perspective, we believe that SMS has definitely not reached its own. That it's actually hasn't even reached its full potential. It's actually far from reaching its full potential, but it's the how can this potential be unlocked, and what are the various strategies and techniques that the operators need to be employing to tap into this, to unlock these revenue streams?
Great. Yes. I mean, there are different technologies that are being used at the moment to enable the operators to embark on this journey, right? So as we said, SMS, I mean, it's been there, it's an old technology, but yes, we still believe, as you said, that there's a space for this. We like to say that SMS still needs to be evolving, right? So evolve new trends, right? So we seeing new trends evolving, which we can touch base a bit later in the third section. But what are these technologies? So basically, the buzzword at the moment, right? Artificial intelligence. Everybody is using this generative AI, right, to enhance their tools, and that's something that not us only, everybody is working on, right? So the open API, which I hinted earlier to, what information, what data can the operator provide to the vendors like us, to the brands, okay, to add additional value. I have a slide next to following this one, which also explains some use cases that we see where the operator can add value. Then you have categorization techniques. Okay, so what are these? So basically you have the traffic, right? And to be able to put certain pricing, for example, in place, you need to categorize, right? So what type of category does this traffic fall under? So it's basically like we've seen in the market, and I think HAUD has been preaching this for quite a while, right? Is, for example,
No, it's right.
how critical is this traffic? Is it premium traffic? Is it authentication traffic?
Is visibility. It's visibility and control. Yes, we have to face it that a lot of operators lack technology to understand what are the different traffic streams that are passing through the networks.
I think the biggest challenge they have is obviously because, as you know as well, the challenges that we have vis-a-vis the content analysis, right? So we need to make sure that your systems, and that's why I mentioned AI and categorization techniques, you need to make sure that your solutions, right, are and adhere to the data privacy.
From the regulatory perspective, you mean? Yes, correct. Of course. That's so safe way of categorizing or while adhering to the data privacy regulations. Right. Yes, absolutely.
So there are different techniques on how you can scan, right, and categorize traffic without looking into the content of the subscriber.
That's a webinar of its own, maybe.
Again, yes, I think it's a good idea. It's a good idea to go there. And finally, one builds on the other is obviously the flexible charging models that one can put in place, right, with the technology, right, to have all these use cases that we will be discussing shortly. However, before going there, I would like to mention a few operator value, what operator can, how can the operator bring value to the enterprises. So there's enhanced analytics and personalization, as we said, if you know, right, the age verification process, right, there's compliance. Okay, again, age verification is one of them, these compliances. There's banks, for example, that needs to comply to GDPR, okay, rules. There's the number intelligence that we said earlier, right? So what kind of information what kind of data can you provide vis-a-vis certain numbers? Okay, I think this is a discussion that is happening quite often now, because as we said, since content analysis is not possible, then number verification as well is prominent, right, to give certain insights on certain numbers. Okay, for example, if this number has lately there was a SIM swap, flag it, red flag, look into it, so these kind of analysis.
So operators hold the data, yeah, so they can be at this trusted enabler because fundamentally operators are trusted brands, yes, and they bring that value to enterprises. It's more a question, how can operators really expose in a secure way, obviously, and compliant way, the data that they have around their subscribers for enterprises to use to increase the value of messaging, yeah, and security of it. It's very interesting.
Yes, and it adds a lot of value, to be honest with you. So, and finally is the flexible charging. I mean, we've been mentioning this from the beginning. So having the right technology, then you can bill, obviously, right, the brands or your partners. Okay, it's important because I didn't mention earlier as well. I mean, who are the players? It's important for the operators to have the ideal partners in place, the ideal technology, but also the ideal partners. Okay, so that is also a very valuable approach. Reconciliations of traffic. So you have all these technology in place to expedite, right, and put certain use cases into motion.
Yeah,
And
so
then
we're coming back
the-
to the differentiated pricing. So you spoke about the flexibility in the charging and billing models, and we spoke about value, right, as well. It's no secret, we mentioned it before today, you alluded to it, you used a word, very key word, ceiling, yeah, price ceiling. And we mentioned things like erosion and traffic decrease. So it's been imminent that SMS has reached, actually exceeded in some markets, the balance of the fine line between value for a brand and its price. Yeah, so we've seen use cases dropping or traffic shifting to alternative channels because in some geographies, some traffic streams, such as, for instance, international traffic streams, have simply become too expensive. But even on some domestic sites, yes, on domestic traffic, we spoke about local banks in some geographies as well that have moved to different channels because SMS has no longer bring value versus price balance. Yes, so defining a pricing strategy going forward for this channel is extremely important. And when we work with our customers, with mobile operators, we always help them with defining a pricing strategy that is strategic. It's a strategic approach. When I say strategic, I mean sustainable. Yes, because there has to be a balance. Brands have budgets. Those budgets are creeping up here. They are increasing year on year, and that is no longer sustainable for them. So if the cost of a certain enterprise or brand grows by X%, they're presented a choice. They either accept the increase, which sometimes it's not easy to present to your CFO, or they have to accept the reality that they have to reduce the usage of the channel, yes, so decrease their traffic, for instance, and that we've seen that happening. So it's very important to have strategic approach to price increase, so implementing sustainable price increases and looking at your market. Yeah, so looking at what is the elasticity and what is really the reality of the market that the operator operates in. So what is the ARPU of the subscriber? Yeah, what is the regional pricing? What are the other operators doing in the same market? Because SMS is so unregulated, very often even the rates between the operators, they differ, and they can differ quite a bit. So if one operator has a very high rate and the other operator in the market has a relatively low rate, that still is the market average rate that is relevant for the brand. Yeah, so one operator cannot look into price strategy just in silos of their own subscriber base, because a brand will not communicate with just a subscriber base of an operator. The operator needs to look at holistically at the whole market, and also what are the local enterprises willing to pay, yes, and what is the local SME currently using, for what are the channels that have been adopted in the current SME market, or especially on the domestic side, to basically see what's going to be an interesting rate or attractive rate for brands. And yes, of course, I'm not trying to say that SMS should be as cheap as email, because it does bring value, much greater conversion rate. So it is a premium channel, but again, it needs to reflect the value, and the value might differ between the different messaging streams. Yes, so we have different use cases for messaging. Verification traffic might be priced at higher rate, and perhaps the lower quality engagement traffic could be priced on a different rate. SMS should not be treated equal. It's actually not a common practice to employ. Yes, if we're dealing with different priority services or different criticality services, to price them at the same rate. So how does that work in practice, Ron, from product perspective? This is complicated, right?
Yes,
there's a certain complexity.
It is. I mean, you need to define all this, right? So actually, I would have asked you, what is the appetite and the aptitude as well of the operator? How do they have the resources to do this? What do
it's
you
complicated.
Think?
So operators will always fundamentally think it's going to increase their operation complexity, and there's also an existing fear that it might erode some potentially premium channels because of creating a point of leakage, possible leakage of traffic through those lower entry points, because that's the experience that some operators had in the future, that they created a bit more flexible pricing models, but they have not become successful. And actually, on the opposite, they eroded their existing volumes because all the traffic flew through the cheapest entry point, without enforcement. So how do we deal with that in practice?
Yeah, I mean, as we said, right? So there are ways, the technology in place. There needs to be a whole process behind it. Okay, where you start with the sender registration, okay, and the sample text, the categories, etc., and obviously each and every message will be, or not every message, but I mean which and every use case will be analyzed separately. I mean, there will be negotiations with the brands, and obviously the brands will also prefer, in this case, right? We've seen it quite often that certain brands would prefer, for example, to have, and you hinted to it as well, have a more longevity, how would you say that, for the years ahead, so they keep price stable as much as possible. Okay, so there are different criteria on which you can differentiate charge. Okay, based on volume, for example, as you said, based on the use case, premium, regular, category, and stuff like this. And you can also have a combination if you want to complicate maybe, or have a much more flexible, pricing model in place. So, Joanna, I'm conscious of the time, so I'll jump to the next slide, where basically, based on all this, now you have the technology to be able to differentiate price. As we said, obviously, you can start looking at those use cases that are not, or are on channels, like email, for example, which you mentioned earlier, okay, that we can bring back, or we can create new use cases. However, before jumping into this, we had a very interesting discussion, because we understand from your information that you shared with us that actually even within the same country, the market differs between the domestic and international. Would you kindly elaborate on that?
I think when we look at the traffic profile, A2P traffic profile, every market is different, but broadly, we see if we look at use cases in messaging, there's a very big portion of verification traffic that is currently being sent, but that really varies between domestic and international traffic. So we're in total traffic, we see a variety of use cases, and then on domestic side, we see quite a lot of verification traffic, but also a lot of marketing traffic, notification reminders, etc. While when we look at the international traffic, the profile is entirely different. The international traffic, 90% of it, which is and sometimes even higher in markets that are higher priced, is verification of nature. And that creates a dependency of the international SMS channel on this verification traffic streams. Meaning, if, let me put it in the layman terms, if this traffic would be to shift to a different channel, that of course would mean that 90% of that traffic is gone. And then adding on the top of it that traffic originates from a limited set of senders, top international senders, that of course creates the dependency of the channel. But even in the total A2P traffic, I've statistics vary per market, but there are revised statistics that now 53% of the total A2P traffic might be verification of nature, which is quite high. And that was the last publication from Juniper Research. This is earlier presentation from Mobile Squared, but it's definitely verification is a very significant. So how do we create more use cases in messaging? Yes, to reduce this dependency is really a challenge, because we have the verification has been the primary use case already, and is very well anchored, right? We have a lot of verification points, but that also creates dependency of A2P on that verification channel. And we have to remember that the adoption of SMS among businesses is still very low. Yes, 10% of businesses using SMS, meaning potential is still huge, isn't it? So what can be what could be those additional use cases that can come to messaging, and how?
Yeah, in fact, we have highlighted the 4 areas, so kind of a funnel, right? So there's the existing use cases that we want to protect, we want to keep there, right, as much as possible. However, as you said, there's a huge dependency in O2P, right? And what will happen in the next coming years? So what are we looking at? So we discussed all this so far up to this point to protect the network, right? Protect the SMS, protect the channel, and move towards a flexible approach on the differentiated pricing. And then the next step is obviously to start looking at what kind of new content can you put in the market, right? So how can you how can I say, make this more interesting, right, to the brands? What can you, what additional value can you bring within the SMS itself? The content we've seen, for example, from different sessions that we had, the rich SMS. Okay, so kind of a new way of handling RCS. So. New applications. So there are new applications out there coming every day, out every day, and also the IoT business, right? So which relies in some areas heavily on this SMS. And finally, the industry, as you mentioned, right? So can we, with this digital transformation, which you mentioned earlier, yes, there was a high take-up, but what else? Who else can start using SMS, right? And bring value to both enterprises and customers. And I have a few use cases listed here. So basically, we've seen the A2P P2A conversational approach, engagement between the customer and the enterprise. And something I would like to mention here is, I think, again, we've discussed this multiple times, that messaging is something that the user would prefer to use when speaking to the brand, right, rather than calling. Somehow,
especially
everybody
the young generation
prefers messaging. I think it's also based on time, because I'm also a heavy user on messaging than calling.
We're all calls. It's more instant, more personal, and you don't have to be like we are all on virtual calls these days. It's difficult to take a phone call. And this is my own personal example. I think we only have a few minutes left.
Yes.
So maybe we can summarize a bit. We started this presentation saying we wanted to show a way of securing trust and redefining value in A2P SMS so that it's sustainable and it, and it keeps the channel relevant. So this strategy really shows that revenue diversification the strategy will result in revenue diversification. So more use cases in SMS mean less dependency on the existing use cases that, such as verification, can potentially in the future also erode to more alternative channels as the digitalization of the world progresses, right? But how about customer satisfaction?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, once you start looking and making this channel trusted way, right? Obviously, by engaging the customers in this case, right? Between the engagement between the two ends, you will increase the satisfaction, as we mentioned in the
for
previous
the user,
slide.
but for the brand as well. Yeah,
for the brand as well, because obviously it's giving us its support to the subscriber, which is keeping him happy, basically, right? Answering to his questions, retaining a subscriber, retaining a customer more than a subscriber, right? So I was going to mention this, and I stopped with this one before jumping to the fraud one. I mean, I've discussed this multiple times. I am a heavy user of the phone, but I don't like in-app messages because it bombards you with the amount of applications I have. But one frustration that I always have is this communication that I have with my bank or my service provider, right? I go in app and I start chatting with them, and then I'm logged in work, I have to answer a call, and then all of a sudden this chat I forgot about it, and it goes away. It's
so
closed, and I have to start again. It's frustrating. And we've seen this in cases. Yes, I've seen these cases where from an app they send you SMS. Listen, Ron, you have a message
to go back to the
app,
conversation. Yeah, what a great use case for SMS. Indeed, yes.
So
then
if that costs
a
fraction. Yeah, that's a user engagement, right? So the satisfaction there is very important, And finally, obviously, we started with this way, we end up with this way, and this way. So we need to make sure that this channel is trusted. We try to remove as much as possible, keep it secure for peace of mind, right? So we need to make sure that both ends can use this channel with peace of mind and make it obviously a safer space for everybody within the market, the A2P industry. And obviously, hopefully, it will increase the adoption of SMS. That's all from my end.
On the dot, we used our whole hour. I don't see any questions in the Q&A box. Are there any questions from the audience we can answer? Not that we have a lot of time to answer, to be honest. But I think, we touched on a lot of topics today, and hopefully if any questions arise from our audience that we could answer.
They can reach to us as well, Joanna, to go into detail.
Yes, you can find us on LinkedIn. This webinar will be shared on the Career Community social media channels as well. We'll be following up with more material on these topics, such as a white paper and some publications which we'll be sharing with the audience. And if any questions arise, then you can always find us at HAUD. So thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Ron, as well, and share this insightful webinar together. Thanks all for coming, and over to the studio.
Thanks, Joanna. Thanks to the Career Community for giving us this time to speak about one of our strategies, right? So this strategy keeps evolving it's a fast-grown industry. Thanks a lot.
Joanna and Ron, thank you so much for this presentation and great discussion. Thank you for providing us, all the participants, with a lot of interesting and relevant information that definitely can improve the skills and knowledge. For all, the recording of the webinar will be available on the CC Media Gallery shortly. You will also be able to find the link in the video description below. Thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you all.
Thanks.